Sagittarius, be careful. Tomorrow is the last day. Please don't go to this place. There are moments in life, Sagittarius, when your spirit feels the tremble of something invisible, like a silent breeze that brushes past your skin but leaves behind a chill in your chest. You've always been a seeker, a traveler not just of lands but of truths, walking a winding path lit by intuition, freedom, and an unrelenting thirst for something real. But today I ask you to pause, not to leap forward as you usually do, but to listen. There is a quiet message reaching for you through the veil, carried by your guardian angel, your inner wisdom, and the universe itself. This isn't just another video. This is a sacred moment meant only for you. And if you've been feeling it, an unease without name, a weight in your chest when you think of a particular place or person, please don't dismiss it. This is your soul whispering. Not this time. Not this place. Sagittarius, I know you don't like being held back. You are fire in motion. But even the stars stop to listen before they fall. In this video, I'll walk with you through something tender, mysterious, and deeply personal. Together, we'll explore the invisible crossroads you now stand before. So if something in you stirs as you hear these words, if your chest rises with emotion, or your eyes soften with recognition, know that this message is for you. And if it touches something deep within, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Not as an obligation, but as a way to say, yes, I'm here. I'm listening. I'm ready. Gate 1. Your intuition is not a whisper. It's a fire you've been afraid to light. Sagittarius, your intuition has never been quiet. It has been a roaring flame, flickering at the edge of your awareness, begging to be seen. But you, in all your courage and compassion, have often mistaken silence for strength. You've walked into places that dulled your fire just because someone asked. You've said yes when every part of your soul was screaming no. Not out of ignorance, but out of loyalty. Out of the habit of believing that if you can carry someone else's burden, maybe they'll finally see your worth. You are the archer, yes, but lately you've been lowering your bow, not because you forgot your power, but because you didn't want to hurt someone who handed you their pain with a smile. And yet, here you are, once again on the edge of a decision that feels small but isn't. Someone is calling you. A gathering, a place, an old relationship, an unfinished thread. And though they make it sound harmless, even sweet, something inside you is tightening. That something isn't fear. It's knowing. I've met people like you, Sagittarius, fiercely independent, yet paradoxically chained by old promises. One woman I remember vividly, a 42-year-old Sagittarius, told me, I knew the room felt wrong the second I stepped in, but I stayed, smiled, tried to be gracious. And the moment I left, I cried in my car. I don't even know why. But she knew. Her soul had screamed in silence. Her fire had flickered in protest. She just didn't want to disappoint the people who had long forgotten what it meant to protect her light. There's a part of you that still believes endurance is nobility. That walking back into a room that once broke you is a sign of strength. But Sagittarius, what if the true strength lies in turning away? In trusting the burn in your chest that says, this place cannot hold me anymore. The universe doesn't always scream. It doesn't always send thunder or crash your world to get your attention. Sometimes it's a strange ache when you hear a name, a sudden tiredness when you remember an invitation, a gentle nausea at the thought of showing up again. What if those are sacred signs? What if your higher self is trying to protect you from replaying a wound you've already healed? I recall another story, this time a Sagittarius man in his early 50s, who shared this. I only went because my son insisted. A family dinner, they said. But halfway through, I realized I was being pulled back into a version of myself I had fought so hard to leave behind. I smiled through the evening, but my soul didn't come home with me. His voice cracked when he said that. Because some places don't just take your time, they take your light. And here's the truth you've been avoiding, Sagittarius. Not everyone who calls you needs to be answered. Not every invitation deserves your presence. Not every smile is rooted in love. And most importantly, not every place that once held you still deserves access to the temple of your soul. This is your moment to choose yourself. Not in defiance, but in devotion. To say, I'm not going, and I don't owe anyone an explanation. You are not being cruel. You are being clear. You are not being dramatic. You are being discerning. You are not abandoning them. You are finally coming home to yourself. If your chest is tightening, if tears are welling, if your mind is racing, pause. Don't run. Don't rationalize. Breathe. This is not fear. This is freedom knocking. And if this resonates, I invite you, gently, lovingly, to write this vow somewhere just for you. I will not betray my soul to ease someone else's discomfort. I am not the light for a place that no longer wants to shine. Because the truth is, Sagittarius, your intuition hasn't gone quiet. You've just been turning the volume down so others wouldn't feel exposed. But you don't need to do that anymore. In Gate 2, we'll speak of the signs from the universe that are no longer whispers. They are echoes ringing across your path. And once you hear them, you won't be able to unhear them. Gate 2. When the universe speaks louder than words. Sagittarius, you have always trusted the open sky more than the confines of a room. But lately, even under vast stars, you felt a pressure you couldn't name. A vague disquiet. A tension not born from logic but from something older, deeper. You haven't been able to sleep, not from worry, but because something inside you is refusing to settle. The universe has been speaking, not with alarms or loud warnings, but with a quiet insistence. A whisper you keep trying to explain away. Maybe I'm just overthinking. It's probably nothing. But Sagittarius, your spirit was born with a compass. An inner wildness that always knows when the wind shifts. That subtle shift you've been ignoring? It is sacred. You felt it. Your breath catching for no reason when you hear a certain name. Your body going cold when you picture a familiar place. That sharp spike of emotion when you remember a gathering, a conversation, a promise. You've brushed it off, smiled, said, "It's fine." But the truth is, something is not fine. And your soul knows it. I remember a Sagittarius woman, 37, who had a dream she couldn't shake. In the dream, she stood before a mirror, but her reflection was wrong. Unfamiliar eyes stared back. They weren't angry, just knowing. She woke up with tears on her cheeks. She told me, "I almost went to that reunion, but something in me said no." Days later, she heard what had been planned behind her back. A cruel game in the name of closure. Her absence wasn't weakness. It was protection. Sagittarius, the universe is not trying to scare you. It's trying to save you. Sometimes the door doesn't slam shut. It simply doesn't feel right anymore. You sense it in your gut. You dream it at 2 a.m. You feel it in your chest like a tide pulling away from the shore. But because you are brave, because you are kind, you doubt it. You delay. You try to give people the benefit of the doubt. And in doing so, you walk back into stories your soul has already finished reading. The truth is this. Not every test comes with a warning label. Sometimes it arrives as an old invitation. A casual text. A familiar voice that says, "Come over." And beneath those words lies the same energy that once broke you. The same energy your spirit outgrew. I want you to ask yourself honestly, why are you still considering going? Is it love? Is it peace? Or is it fear? Fear of disappointing someone? Fear of being misunderstood? Fear of being called cold? Distant? Changed? But Sagittarius, growth will always be misinterpreted by those who needed you to stay small. You don't owe anyone your light if they've proven they cannot hold it. You don't need to prove your worth through endurance. You don't need to explain why you no longer feel safe in a room that once called itself home. Home, real home, never makes you question your intuition. One Sagittarius man once wrote to me, "I kept dreaming of a closed gate. Every time I tried to open it, something whispered, 'Not this way.' I ignored it and went anyway. And that night I sat in a circle of people smiling at me, but my soul felt stripped. I couldn't explain it. I just knew. I wasn't supposed to be there." His story is not rare. It is a mirror to what you're facing now. If you are experiencing unexplainable fatigue, flashes of memory, sudden headaches when you think of someone or somewhere, don't ignore them. This is not paranoia. This is your spiritual body resisting a place where your essence is not safe. And there's something else. A sign that often goes unnoticed, when the joy of something you used to love disappears. A location, a group, a relationship that once lit you up now feels faded. That's not disconnection. That's transformation. You are not losing touch with joy. You are shedding what no longer supports your joy. Sagittarius, what's calling you right now may be familiar, but that doesn't make it right. You are not the same person who once said yes out of guilt. You are not the same soul who once said, "I'll just go and keep it quiet." You are evolving. And evolution often requires sacred withdrawal. I ask you now gently, firmly. If you don't listen to your intuition now, when will you? If you keep choosing old stories out of habit, how will the new chapter ever begin? Write this down if it stirs something in you. This time I listen. Even if no one understands. Even if they call me distant. Even if I walk alone, I walk with my truth. Because here's the miracle, Sagittarius. The moment you say no to the wrong door, a new one begins to open. Not always instantly, not always visibly, but energetically. A quiet shift. A divine alignment. A path that only reveals itself to the brave soul who turns away from the past. And you, dear Sagittarius, were born brave. In Gate 3, we will explore the sacred crossroads you now stand at. And the karmic weight of this decision that seems so small, but could change everything. Let me know when you're ready to continue. Gate 3, the karmic crossroads and the sacred door you cannot see. Sagittarius, this isn't just a casual choice you're being asked to make. This is a karmic intersection. A moment that echoes across lifetimes disguised as something ordinary. A meeting, a gathering, a call, an invitation. But beneath its surface lies something far more profound. A question from the universe whispered straight into your soul. Will you return to what once wounded you? Or will you choose the unknown that leads to your liberation? You may think you're simply deciding whether or not to go. But what you're actually deciding is whether to protect your light or offer it again to a room that once dimmed it. You're choosing whether your soul walks forward into a timeline of healing or loops once more into a pattern it's already tried to break free from. Karma does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it knocks in silence. And when it does, you have to be still enough to hear it. You're standing at the threshold now, Sagittarius. And there are no signs, no clear arrows pointing the way. Only your intuition. Only that quiet tremor inside that says, "This is no longer meant for me." I remember a Sagittarius man in his late 30s who once told me, "It was just a birthday dinner." That's what I kept saying. Just a dinner. But as he approached the door, he felt his whole body pause. A voice inside whispered, "Don't go in." He ignored it. That night, everything he tried so hard to forgive was reopened. Old wounds. Subtle jabs. Eyes that judged without words. I left that night, he told me, feeling like I had traded my peace for a chair at someone else's table. Sagittarius, you have sat at too many tables where love was conditional, where peace had to be negotiated, where your truth was seen as a threat. And yet you stayed. Out of politeness. Out of loyalty. Out of a hope that maybe this time things would be different. But now, that place isn't yours anymore, not because it changed, but because you did. You are not here to prove your strength by enduring one more uncomfortable night. You are not here to silence your truth so others can remain comfortable in their illusion. You are not here to replay roles that your soul has already outgrown. The crossroads before you is not about a single day. It's about your future. And what makes it karmic is that this choice, this moment, will ripple. If you go, you delay the shift that has already begun. If you stay true to yourself, you open a doorway that can only be accessed through clarity and conviction. And the universe has confirmed this for you already. In the past few days, perhaps you've noticed synchronicities, random moments that feel loaded with meaning, a dream with unfamiliar symbols, a conversation that startled your heart awake, or even a tarot card like the Seven of Swords warning of deception, of illusion, of returning to places that no longer serve your highest path. And perhaps alongside it, the sun, the promise of clarity, of joy, but only if you step away from the shadow. Sagittarius, you are not being punished. You are being prepared. And what lies ahead will not wait for someone who keeps glancing back at the past, hoping it changes its face. One woman I know, a Sagittarius in her 40s, chose not to attend a long-anticipated event. She'd already bought the dress, had her hair done, but something inside said, "Don't go." That night, instead of stepping into the old world, she stayed home, lit a candle, wrote a letter to her future self. She told me, "The next morning, I woke up with a feeling of lightness I hadn't felt in years. And then something shifted. A job offer. A message I'd been waiting for. It was as if the universe had been holding back my blessing until I proved I was ready to let go of what wasn't mine." This is the lesson, Sagittarius. You cannot walk into the new while clinging to the old. And no, you don't need a good enough reason to decline. The reason is already in your bones. You feel it. You know it. And that knowing is divine. If your heart is stirring now, if there's a quiet ache or a sudden clarity rising in you, I invite you to pause and write this down. I do not need proof to choose peace. I do not need permission to protect my soul. I do not need to return to what I've already transcended. And when you say no, not from anger, but from self-respect, you will feel something sacred unlock. You'll sense it in your breath, in the way your chest expands, in the stillness that replaces anxiety. That is the soul saying thank you. Thank you for finally choosing me. In Gate 4, we will explore what lies beyond that sacred no. The awakening, the spiritual homecoming, and the subtle yet miraculous shift that only appears when you refuse to repeat the old pattern. Gate for the sacred no, and the light that follows. Sagittarius, there comes a time in every soul's journey when the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. Not in bitterness, not in rebellion, but in reverence. Because you finally understand that staying would cost too much. Not money, not time, but yourself. And that is a price you no longer have to pay. You have outgrown the rooms that once made you feel like you had to shrink to be loved. You have outshone the conversations where silence was mistaken for peace. You've reached a point where returning would not be noble, it would be betrayal. Not of them, of you. This is not about proving anything. This is about protecting everything sacred that has grown inside you through your most silent battles. There was a Sagittarius viewer, 71 years old, who once wrote to me, I stood at the doorstep, hearing laughter inside. But my hand refused to knock. I turned around, went home and cried, not because I was sad, but because I realized I had finally chosen myself. And that choice was so unfamiliar. It felt like both grief and grace. Her words stayed with me, because sometimes the greatest victory comes not with applause, but with tears of quiet truth. Sagittarius, this is your quiet truth. You don't need to go back. You don't need to answer that call. You don't need to stand at the edge of old wounds and wonder if they've healed enough for you to return. They haven't. And you don't need them to. The place that once hurt you may now look different, but your soul still remembers. Not in bitterness, but in wisdom. There is no need to test yourself again. No need to prove that you're strong enough to endure what once nearly broke you. You've already passed that test. You don't need to retake it. The shift begins the moment you say, no more. You may feel a hollow ache at first, a stillness that feels unfamiliar. You may wonder, have I done the right thing? And then without warning the light will come. Not loud, not dramatic, but soft. A release in your chest. A moment of breath that doesn't tremble. A thought that doesn't spiral. A peace that doesn't need permission. This is the gift of sacred boundaries. This is what it means to be sovereign. Sagittarius, when you walk away from what no longer holds your light, you create space for the miracle. You step into the frequency where true connections begin. Not those that drain you, but those that water you. You have waited long enough to be chosen. And now it is your turn to choose. Choose peace. Choose clarity. Choose the life that was always waiting for you, beyond that old door. And when they ask, why didn't you come? You don't need a paragraph. You don't need to explain the language of your intuition. You can simply say, it didn't feel right. And that is enough. That has to be enough. Sagittarius, in the teachings of spirit, there is an ancient truth. The soul does not shout. It withdraws. And your withdrawal from what is not love is not rejection, it is return. You are returning to your true home, the one that lives in your spirit, not someone else's approval. The one that calls you not to attend but to awaken. Write this down now if your heart is steady enough to speak it. I have closed the old door. I no longer dim myself to make others feel comfortable. I no longer stay where my soul cannot exhale. I walk forward even if I walk alone, for I am walking in truth. This is not just an emotional decision. It is a spiritual one. And when you make it, the universe will respond. Not always in fireworks. Sometimes in something as subtle as a phone call you didn't expect. A new opportunity. A healing you didn't know you needed. A dream that returns not to haunt you, but to remind you of who you were always meant to become. Sagittarius, the chapter is not closing because you failed. It's closing because you finally learned what love is not. And now your soul is ready for what love truly is. Conclusion: the door has closed, and the light is yours now. Sagittarius, if you've come this far, it means something deep inside you has already shifted. You didn't just listen, you felt. You didn't just hear these words, you recognized them, as if they were echoes from your own soul, finally coming home. This was never just about a decision. It was about sovereignty, about reclaiming the sacred space within you that no one has the right to trespass. Not even in the name of love, family, or memory. You have walked through fire before. But this time you didn't need to burn to prove your strength. This time your strength was in not going, in choosing peace over performance, stillness over sacrifice, intuition over obligation. Let this moment mark a return, not to a place, not to a person, but to yourself, the self you kept silencing, the self who waited quietly at the edges of every old room, hoping you'd finally notice that you didn't belong there anymore. You see now, don't you? That you don't need a catastrophe to justify your boundaries. You don't need conflict to say no. You don't need to be pushed out to know it's time to walk away. You've matured beyond that. You've healed enough to sense when the energy no longer matches your spirit, and to step away without guilt. So let this be your turning point. Let this be the night you close the old door, not with anger but with reverence. Let this be the breath you took that didn't carry someone else's weight. Let this be the moment you wrote a new story, not in someone else's voice but your own. Sagittarius, you are the light. And from this day on, you no longer need to beg for a seat in a room that was never built for your flame. Now all that's left is the future. And if this journey has touched something sacred in you, something tender and true, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe. Not out of habit, not out of routine, but as a soft declaration. I'm here. I've chosen my soul, and I'm ready to receive what comes next. You're not alone anymore. You never were. You were simply waiting to come home to yourself.